You ever get that uneasy feeling in your gut like something is horribly wrong but you can't put your finger on it? Yeah, that's where I've been mentally for the past month. It started with something I thought was just an online prank, a harmless dive into the dark web. Just for kicks. Curiosity can get the better of anyone, right? I wasn't looking for anything specific, just browsing. But then I came across this forum, the Circus Tent. The name seemed weirdly innocent for a dark web page, so I clicked. I knew I shouldn't have. The posts were all bizarre. People were sharing their personal interactions with clowns. Not the fun, party kind, though. These were stories about encounters, creepy ones. Like being followed home, finding clown dolls in their mailboxes, or worse, getting stalked for days by people in makeup that didn't wash off. At first, it just seemed like one of those edgy urban legend boards. People making up stories to scare each other. But then I found a thread that made my stomach twist. A post titled, "Ever wonder what happens when the clown follows you home?" It had a link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. What opened wasn't a video or an article, it was a chat window. The screen was black with a simple prompt that read, "Invite the circus, say yes, and a performer will come find you." I don't know what came over me. It felt like a joke, just some kind of weird gimmick. So I typed, "Yes." And then everything went still. I waited, expecting something to happen, maybe another message, but nothing. My screen just went black for a second, and then my laptop restarted itself. That's when I knew I screwed up. That night I heard the first noise from the basement. I live alone, by the way. My house isn't some creepy old shack either. It's just a small place on the edge of town. But that noise, it was out of place. It sounded like a soft tap, like someone dragging a nail against the basement door from the inside. I froze in my seat on the couch, convincing myself it was the wind, maybe an old pipe shifting. I wanted to brush it off. But curiosity got the better of me, like it always does. I grabbed my phone and a flashlight and went to check. When I opened the basement door, the air hit me. It was stale and smelled faintly of mildew, which was normal for an old house like mine. But then, I saw it, a balloon. A single bright red balloon sitting at the bottom of the stairs. At first I thought it was some kind of prank. Maybe someone got into my house while I was gone earlier, left it there as a joke. I even chuckled to myself, trying to shake off the nerves. But that didn't last long. When I stepped down to pop the balloon, it made this weird, squelching sound. Like it wasn't filled with air. There was something wet inside it. I squeezed the balloon gently, and it felt wrong, too heavy. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't stop myself. I took a deep breath and bit down on the knot to open it. As soon as it popped, thick, red liquid spilled all over my shoes. I gagged. It wasn't paint, it was blood. And taped to the inside of the balloon was a little folded note. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It had just 2 words. "He's here." That's when I started hearing the giggles. Soft, high-pitched and distorted, like someone trying to mimic a child's laugh. It came from somewhere deep in the basement, beyond where my flashlight could reach. I swear to God, it was the most unnatural sound I've ever heard. Every instinct told me to get the hell out of that basement. But as I backed away, I saw movement in the dark. A figure hunched low, just at the edge of my flashlight's beam. The light hit him for a split second, a man dressed in a grimy clown suit, his makeup smeared across his face in a sick smile that didn't match his eyes. His eyes were wide and empty, like there was nothing human behind them. I ran. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it. I stood there, shaking, my heart racing so fast it felt like it was going to explode. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. At first there was nothing, but then the tapping started again. This time it was faster, and then the voice. It came from the other side of the door, soft and taunting. "Knock, knock. Let me in, kid. I know you're out there." I backed away, my whole body trembling. This wasn't just some prank. Someone, something, was in my house. I tried to call the police, but my phone wouldn't work. It just kept flashing between apps like it was possessed. And then, a text message popped up on the screen. It was from an unknown number. "You invited him, now he stays." I locked myself in my room that night, trying to convince myself it was all a bad dream, but I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, I'd hear the giggles again, soft, distant, but always there, coming from the basement. And every time I checked my phone, there'd be another message.
"He likes you. He's waiting for you. Let him in." I swear I could hear movement downstairs, heavy footsteps shuffling around the kitchen. At one point, I heard something scrape against the walls, like nails dragging slowly. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The worst part was when I heard the door to the basement creak open again. I don't know how. I had locked it, but I heard it. The slow, deliberate creak of the door swinging open. And then, the soft patter of footsteps coming up the stairs. I was too scared to move. I just sat in the corner of my room, clutching my phone like it was some kind of lifeline. I didn't dare open the door. Around 3 a.m., I heard the footsteps stop outside my room, and then a quiet knock. "Knock, knock!" I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. The door didn't open, but I heard him slide something under the door. It was a picture. When I finally worked up the courage to look, my stomach dropped. It was a photo of me, taken just a few minutes earlier while I was curled up in the corner. That's when I knew. He was watching. He had been watching the entire time. And now, he's in the house with me. I haven't left my room since. I can still hear him wandering the halls, sometimes giggling, sometimes just standing silently outside my door. I don't know what he wants. But I know one thing for sure. The clown is no longer in the basement. He's waiting, right outside my door. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak, every distant tap made my skin crawl. He was still out there, I knew it. At one point, I thought I saw a shadow flicker under the door, like he was pacing back and forth. I tried calling people, anyone who could help. But every time I dialed a number, the line would cut off, replaced with this eerie, static-filled giggle. It was his way of reminding me, "You're not getting out of this." At around 5 a.m., when the first hint of light began creeping through my windows, the footsteps finally stopped. I didn't hear him leave. It was like he just melted into the shadows. My gut told me he was still there, waiting, watching. But the house had fallen completely silent, and somehow that felt worse. I forced myself to get up, my legs stiff from staying curled in the same position all night. My phone buzzed as soon as I moved. Another message. "Miss me?" I threw my phone across the room, my chest tightening. I couldn't do this. I had to get out of the house. I grabbed my shoes, threw on a hoodie, and crept toward the door as quietly as I could. The air in the hallway felt heavier, as if the whole house was holding its breath. I made it downstairs without hearing anything. No giggles, no tapping, no footsteps. The basement door was open, just as I feared. But I refused to look. I kept my head down and focused on getting to the front door. The moment my hand touched the doorknob, though, I heard it. A slow, deliberate exhale from the direction of the kitchen. It was quiet, but unmistakable. Someone was in there. I froze, my heart thudding in my ears. My mind raced. If I ran, he'd hear me. If I stayed, I'd be a sitting duck. I turned the doorknob as slowly as possible, trying not to make a sound. And then, just as I cracked the door open, bang! The kitchen chair toppled over, and something heavy slammed onto the floor. I bolted out the door, my shoes barely on, sprinting across my front yard like my life depended on it, because it did. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I ran until my legs felt like jelly and my lungs burned. I ended up at a gas station a few blocks away, panting and sweating, looking like I had seen a ghost. The cashier gave me a weird look, but I didn't care. I grabbed a water bottle from the cooler and leaned against the counter, trying to catch my breath. That's when I felt my phone buzz again. It was another text. This time, it was a photo. I almost dropped the phone when I saw it. It was a picture of the gas station, taken from right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just the empty parking lot and the dull hum of the streetlights. My stomach twisted in knots. He was following me. Somehow, he was following me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go back to the house, but staying here felt just as dangerous. I asked the cashier if I could use their landline to call the police, but as soon as I picked up the receiver, I heard that same static-filled giggle. The clown was screwing with me.
Desperate, I called my friend Jordan. He's one of the few people I trust. I begged him to come pick me up, explaining everything in a frantic rush. To his credit, he didn't ask too many questions. "I'm on my way," he said. "Don't move." I stayed by the gas station entrance, my eyes darting to every shadow, every movement in the corner of my vision. I swear I saw a flash of red out of the corner of my eye, a balloon drifting past the edge of the parking lot. But when I turned to look, it was gone. Jordan showed up about 10 minutes later, and I practically dove into his car. "Drive, just drive," I muttered, slamming the door behind me. We pulled out of the gas station, and for the first time in hours, I felt a small sense of relief. But it didn't last. As we turned onto the main road, Jordan glanced in the rearview mirror and went pale. "Dude, there's someone in the back seat." My blood ran cold. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. Slowly, I turned around, and my heart nearly stopped. There he was, the clown, sitting perfectly still, his hands folded neatly in his lap, with that same smeared, disturbing grin on his face. His makeup looked even worse up close, like it had been painted on with rotten grease paint. His eyes, though, those hollow, soulless eyes, were locked onto mine. I let out a scream, and Jordan slammed on the brakes. The clown didn't move. He just sat there, grinning. And then, without warning, he started giggling, soft at first, then louder and louder, until it was this shrill, maniacal cackle that filled the entire car. Jordan threw the car into park and whipped around, ready to fight. But the back seat was empty. The clown was gone. Just like that. We sat there in stunned silence, our hearts racing. "What the hell was that?" Jordan whispered, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. I didn't have an answer. I was too shaken to speak.
After what felt like an eternity, we decided to go back to Jordan's place. I couldn't be alone, not after that. But as we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that the clown was still with us. Watching. Waiting. When we got to his apartment, Jordan triple-locked the door and pulled out his baseball bat, just in case. "You're crashing here tonight," he said, trying to sound reassuring. But neither of us slept. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside, made us jump. I swear I heard the faint sound of giggling, but Jordan insisted it was just my imagination. At around 3 a.m, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "I'll see you soon, kid." And attached was a video, filmed from inside Jordan's apartment. It showed me, sitting on the couch, holding my phone. I dropped the phone in pure panic, my hands trembling so bad I could barely breathe. Jordan snatched it up and stared at the screen, his face going pale. Then we heard it. The sound of soft, deliberate footsteps coming from Jordan's closet. I didn't think my heart could beat any harder, but the sound of those footsteps inside Jordan's closet proved me wrong. Every hair on my body stood on end. Jordan and I exchanged a look, both of us frozen in place. Neither of us wanted to move, but we knew we couldn't just sit there. Whatever was in that closet, it wasn't going to leave on its own. Jordan gripped the baseball bat tighter, and I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find from the counter. We moved toward the closet together, step by step, our breaths shaky and shallow. The apartment was dead silent now, except for those soft, deliberate steps on the other side of the closet door. Jordan looked at me, his lips trembling. "On 3, he whispered. I nodded. 1, 2, 3. He yanked the closet door open, raising the bat. The light from the hallway spilled inside, illuminating nothing. The closet was empty. Completely, impossibly empty. Just a couple of old jackets and shoes thrown on the floor. Jordan cursed under his breath, lowering the bat. "There's no way." I was about to say something when we both heard it. A giggle. This time it was behind us.
We spun around, weapons ready, but no one was there. The apartment felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. And then, something clicked. My phone buzzed again, and against every instinct I had, I picked it up. It was another video. In the shaky, dimly lit clip, Jordan and I were standing exactly as we were now, right in front of the open closet. But behind us, hunched low in the corner of the hallway, was the clown. His head tilted unnaturally, eyes wide with that same lifeless grin. The video ended with him slowly raising a finger to his lips. I dropped the phone. My legs almost gave out beneath me. "He was here," I whispered. "He was right here." Jordan didn't say a word. He just grabbed his car keys and bolted for the door, dragging me with him. We didn't stop running until we were in his car, doors locked, bat and knife tossed in the back seat. I could barely breathe, and Jordan looked like he was on the verge of a breakdown. "Where the hell do we go now?" I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. Jordan shook his head, slamming his fists on the steering wheel. I don't know what this is." The air inside the car felt suffocating, heavy with fear and confusion. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see that clown materialize out of thin air again, but there was nothing. For now. Jordan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay at my place. We can't go back to yours. What the hell do we do?" I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think, but my mind was a mess. "We need to tell someone who can help. The cops." "They won't believe us," Jordan interrupted. "They'll think we're high or crazy." And he was right. There was no way we could explain this without sounding insane. A clown following us from the dark web, videos taken from inside our homes. It was the kind of story people laughed at until it happened to them. Suddenly, Jordan's phone lit up, a call from an unknown number. He stared at it, his face pale, and I could tell he was debating whether or not to answer. Before he could make a decision, though, the phone answered itself. The screen went black, and a distorted voice came through the speaker. "Knock! Knock! You can't hide, kids!" We both sat there, paralyzed with fear. And then the line went dead. Without another word, Jordan threw the car into gear and peeled out of the parking lot. I didn't know where we were going, and honestly, I didn't care. As long as it was far away from that apartment, I was good. We drove for what felt like hours, winding through back roads and highways, hoping, praying that we'd lost him. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of the tires on the road. And then, my phone buzzed again. Another photo. It was a picture of Jordan's car, taken just seconds ago, from the outside. I felt my stomach drop. He's following us," I whispered. Jordan's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles turning white. "How? We haven't stopped." Before he could finish, something thudded against the roof of the car. We both jumped and Jordan swerved, nearly running us off the road. "What the hell was that?" Jordan shouted, panic in his voice. I twisted in my seat, trying to look through the back window, but it was too dark to see anything. And then we heard it. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap coming from the roof. It was him. He was on the car. Jordan slammed the brakes, sending the car skidding to a halt on the side of the road. For a moment, everything was still. And then slowly, the tapping started again, this time from the passenger side window. I turned my head, my heart in my throat. And there he was. The clown was crouched on the hood of the car, his face pressed against the glass, grinning like he'd won some twisted game. His teeth were blackened, his makeup smeared and cracked, and his eyes, they were worse than empty. They were hungry,
I screamed and Jordan stomped on the gas. The car lurched forward, throwing the clown off the hood with a sickening thud. But when I looked back, just for a second, he was already standing, watching us drive away with that same horrifying grin. I don't know how long we drove after that. Hours, maybe. We didn't stop until the car started running low on gas, and by then, we were out in the middle of nowhere. We pulled into an empty parking lot, a closed diner, by the looks of it. Jordan killed the engine, and we both sat there in silence, trying to process everything. But then my phone buzzed again. Another message. Almost time, kids. Attached was a map leading us back to my house. And the message that followed sent a chill down my spine. Come home, or I'll bring the circus to you. Jordan sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tight it looked like he might snap it in half. Neither of us spoke for a moment. My phone sat between us like a bomb waiting to go off. We can't go back, Jordan muttered, breaking the silence. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear simmering beneath the surface. He was right, we both knew that. But at the same time, what choice did we have? That last message wasn't a threat, it was a promise. He'd bring the circus to us, and we had no idea what that meant. I sure as hell didn't want to find out. Maybe, I started, swallowing hard. Maybe if we just go back, we can end this. Jordan shot me a look that told me how insane I sounded, but deep down, I think he knew it too. We were running out of time. Running wouldn't save us. If this clown, wanted us at the house, then it wasn't going to stop until we were there. Reluctantly, Jordan put the car in gear. If we die, I'm gonna kill you, he muttered. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying.
We drove in tense silence, the tires humming against the asphalt as we made our way back toward my house. Every mile closer felt like another nail in my coffin. I kept checking the phone, hoping the clown wouldn't send anything else, but part of me knew he was watching. I could feel it, like an itch just beneath my skin. By the time we pulled up to my house, the sky was dark, the street eerily quiet. Jordan killed the engine, and we sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It looked wrong somehow, like the house knew we were coming and had been waiting, just like the clown. "You ready?" Jordan asked, gripping the bat again. His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. I nodded, even though I wasn't ready at all. We stepped out of the car, weapons in hand. The air felt thick, like a storm was about to hit, even though the sky was clear. As we approached the front door, something caught my eye, a red balloon tied to the handle. Jordan reached for it and I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. We stepped inside, and the moment the door shut behind us, everything changed. The lights flickered for a second, and then darkness. "Jesus Christ," Jordan muttered under his breath. "You got a flashlight?" I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar hallway, and something else. Footprints. Red footprints, leading from the front door toward the basement. I stared at them, my heart hammering in my chest. They weren't just paint, they looked wet, fresh. Jordan nudged me. "He's here, isn't he?" I nodded, too scared to speak. The footprints ended at the basement door, which was slightly ajar. A soft creak echoed through the house as it swung open just a little more. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We had no choice now. Together, we descended the stairs, the air growing colder with every step. The smell hit me first, rotting meat mixed with old makeup and sweat. It was thick and overwhelming, making my stomach churn. At the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight beam landed on something that made my blood run cold. It was a circus tent, or at least what looked like one. Strips of red and white cloth draped the walls of the basement, giving it a carnival-like atmosphere. There were balloons scattered everywhere, some popped, others bobbing gently against the walls as if something had brushed past them recently. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was the clown. His back was to us, shoulders hunched as he fiddled with something in his lap. Slowly, he turned his head to look over his shoulder, his face twisted into that same horrific grin. "Glad you could make it," he whispered, his voice soft and playful, as if we were old friends. Jordan gripped the bat tighter. "What the hell do you want?" The clown giggled, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You invited me, remember? Now it's time to play." Before either of us could react, the clown stood up in a fluid, unnatural movement, his limbs bent in ways they shouldn't have, his joints popping audibly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a handful of teeth. Human teeth. He held them out to us, his grin widening. "Would you like to see where these came from?" Jordan lost it. He charged at the clown, bat raised, ready to swing. But before he could land a hit, the clown was on him, fast, too fast. He tackled Jordan to the ground, giggling maniacally as they wrestled. "Run!" Jordan shouted, struggling beneath the clown's weight. "Get out of here!" But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor, my mind trapped in some kind of horrible paralysis. I could only watch as the clown pinned Jordan down, one hand on his throat, the other pulling something from his sleeve, a long, jagged knife. Jordan's eyes locked on mine, wide with fear. "Go!" he choked out. And then, the clown looked at me, his grin stretched impossibly wide. "You can't leave, kid, not until the show's over." He raised the knife. I snapped out of it, lunging forward with the kitchen knife still in my hand. I didn't think, I just acted. I drove the blade into the clown's side, expecting him to scream, but he didn't. He just laughed. It was the most horrific sound I've ever heard, like a child's laughter mixed with nails on a chalkboard. The clown twisted around, the knife still buried in his side, and grabbed my wrist with an iron grip. His skin felt cold, too cold, like a corpse. "Good try," he whispered, his grin never faltering. "But the circus never ends." And with that, he let go. Jordan scrambled to his feet, grabbing me by the arm. "Come on!" he shouted. We bolted up the stairs, the clown's laughter echoing behind us. It followed us all the way to the front door, growing louder and more distorted with every step. We made it outside, slamming the door behind us. But the laughter, it didn't stop. It drifted through the walls, through the windows, as if the house itself was laughing with him. We ran to the car, gasping for breath. Jordan fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. And then, as he finally got the car started, my phone buzzed again, another message. The show must go on. And attached was a photo. It was taken from inside the car, of us, sitting exactly as we were now. The clown's face was just barely visible in the rearview mirror, and he was grinning. We didn't speak. We couldn't. Jordan's hands shook as he hit the gas, the tires screeching as we sped down the empty street. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the clown sitting there, his face twisted into that horrific grin. But all I saw was the dark, empty road stretching out behind us. The message on my phone haunted me. The show must go on. He wasn't done. And deep down, I knew he'd never be done. This wasn't something we could outrun. No matter where we went, he'd follow. "Where do we go now?" Jordan's voice was barely above a whisper. He sounded exhausted, broken. I didn't have an answer. I kept thinking about the basement, the circus tent, the balloons, the clown. This thing wasn't human. He was something else, something that couldn't be killed or escaped. And the worst part, I invited him. I let this nightmare into our lives. My phone buzzed again, jolting me back to reality. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Another message. "Turn around." I stared at the words, my blood turning to ice. "Turn around," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Jordan looked at me, confused. What? The message. It says to turn around. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. We sat there for a moment, both of us breathing heavily, the tension thick enough to choke on. Neither of us dared to look back. And then we heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping.
Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the trunk. I felt my stomach twist into knots. The tapping continued, steady, deliberate, as if someone was waiting for us to open it. Jordan's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. No way, he muttered. But the tapping didn't stop. It was like a metronome, ticking away the seconds until our sanity snapped. Jordan, I whispered, my voice trembling. He slammed his hands on the wheel. I'm not opening it. We sat there in agonizing silence, the tapping growing louder, more insistent. It felt like the car was closing in on us, suffocating us. I could barely breathe. Then, without warning, the tapping stopped. For a second, I thought it was over. But then my phone buzzed again. Another message. Let him out. I dropped the phone, my chest tightening with fear. Jordan looked at me, his face pale. We can't do this. But we didn't have a choice. Whatever was in that trunk wasn't going to stay quiet for long. The clown was toying with us, and if we didn't play along, things were only going to get worse. With a deep breath, I nodded. We have to. Jordan cursed under his breath, but he knew I was right. Slowly we got out of the car, the cold night air hitting us like a slap to the face. The road was empty, silent except for the faint rustling of leaves in the distance. We approached the trunk together, each step feeling heavier than the last. My heart was in my throat, my mind screaming at me to stop, to run. But we couldn't. Not now. Jordan's hands shook as he fumbled with the keys. I stood beside him, clutching the knife I'd taken from my house. I don't know what I thought it would do against whatever was in that trunk, but it was the only thing that made me feel even slightly less helpless. The trunk creaked open, and for a second, we both just stared. It was empty. But then, the smell hit us. That thick, rotten stench of decay, like something had been dead for weeks. I gagged, covering my mouth. Jordan cursed again, backing away.
Suddenly there was a low, raspy whisper. Knock. Knock. The sound came from the trunk, but it was empty. There was nothing there, just darkness and that overwhelming stench. And then, as we stared into the trunk, something moved. A hand, a gloved hand, reached out from the darkness, grabbing the edge of the trunk. It was followed by a head, a face smeared with grease paint, the eyes hollow and dead. The clown pulled himself up from the impossible void, his grin wide, too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. He climbed out of the trunk, standing there in front of us, towering over us. His suit was torn and stained, his makeup cracked and caked on his skin. He tilted his head, his eyes locking onto mine. "I told you, kid," he whispered, his voice soft and mocking. "The show must go on." Jordan swung the bat, aiming for the clown's head, but the clown moved faster than anything human. He grabbed the bat mid-swing, yanking it out of Jordan's hands like it weighed nothing. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it aside, laughing as if we were part of some sick joke. I raised the knife, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "What do you want?" I screamed, the words ripping out of me. The clown's grin never faltered. He leaned in closer, his breath cold and rancid against my face. "You invited me. Now I'm here to stay." I stabbed at him, but the knife might as well have been a toy. It didn't even slow him down. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing so hard I thought my bones might break. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. "You shouldn't have gone looking where you didn't belong," he whispered, his voice dripping with amusement. "But now, the circus is in town." I screamed, thrashing against his grip, but it was no use. His strength was unnatural, inhuman. I could feel my vision going dark, my body giving in to the panic. And then, Just as suddenly as it had started, he let me go. I fell to the ground, gasping for breath. When I looked up, the clown was gone. The trunk was closed, the night silent again. It was as if he'd never been there at all. But the smell, that rotten stench, still lingered, hanging in the air like a reminder. Jordan helped me to my feet, his face pale and sweaty. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. We got back into the car, neither of us daring to look back as we drove away from the house, from the nightmare. But even as we left, I knew deep down that it wasn't over. The clown wasn't done with us. My phone buzzed one last time. A video. It was a live feed from inside my house. The basement door was open, and in the center of the room stood the clown, his head tilted, grinning at the camera. Behind him, the circus tent loomed, larger than before. And then, the message appeared on the screen. "We're just getting started." That was the last time I saw him, but I know he's still out there, watching, waiting. And every night, I hear it, the soft, distant giggle, echoing from somewhere in the dark. The circus is never over.